This is the Rob Kall Bottom Up Show, sponsored by opednews.com, available on Pacifica Progressive Radio Network, iTunes at opednews.com/podcasts, and on Stitcher. My guest today is Drew Silverstein. He's the CEO and founder of Amper Music. Drew believes that humans and artificial intelligence are extraordinary collaborators and strives to use the relationship to propel the creative process forward. Previously, Drew was an award-winning composer, producer, and songwriter for film, television, and video games in Los Angeles at Sonic Fuel Studios. His website is ampermusic.com, AMPERMUSIC.com. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So the reason I invited you on is because I do a show about bottom up and top down, and I decided that it's important to cover artificial intelligence. It's just exploding, and artificial intelligence has bottom up and top down approaches. So when doing some searching, I found you. And to my great delight, I discovered that you have a platform that allows people to create their own sounds for different applications. And I've put hours into it. It's really fun, and it's been productive. If you won't hear it here yet, I still have to figure out the tech of putting it into the beginning of a video show. But if you listen to the radio show, then if you're listening to the radio show, actually, then you will hear in the beginning and throughout the show some IDs of the show that has the music that Amper Music created, or that I created using Amper Music's platform. So thank you.
I'm glad it helped you out.
Yeah, it's really fun. So ampermusic.com. So where does AI fit into what you do?
Yeah, well, I think to understand the answer to that question, we got to take a step back. And I think we can best understand where AI fits into how Amper works by looking at the evolution of technology in the creative space. And we start, a couple hundred years ago, when the ability to express yourself creatively, in this case through music, was a rarefied skill. Everyone has, by the fact that you are a biological living being, you've got creative ideas. Everybody has them. It's a part of what makes us human. The challenge always comes in expressing that idea and in taking it from something that goes on in your head to something that exists in the real world. So if I have a great idea for a painting and then I try to pick up a paintbrush and I'm not talented, the expression of that idea is not going to come across accurately. I have an idea for a song, but I don't know how to sing, or I don't know how to write the music down. The expression of that musical idea isn't going to come across accurately. And so we look back historically, and there was a time when music was only oral, right? There was no written music. It was passed down generation to generation. And then at some point, we started documenting music with pen and paper, or the equivalents of their time.
Now, the same thing happened with language too.
Absolutely, it's not. This evolution is not exclusive to creativity, which I think is why it's so powerful, and why I so believe in the path that we're on, both historically and moving forward.
Now, with language, there have been some very interesting books and people who have explored how the onset of writing and printing and radio and TV all dramatically changed the culture and the way people literally think. And you've got Walter Ong and Neil Postman, for example, exploring the ideas, and it's basically changing the medium of expression, revolutionized not just communication, but culture as well. So Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, I think the trend in language and in music, as we evolved from, writing down music to all of a sudden now we can record it on a wax cylinder, to 30 years ago, now it's digital music and now AI music. The common, the common point of evolution is that in every one of these technological advances, the ability to express oneself creatively through music became more and more democratized.
Democratized. That's a word that's used all throughout digital technology. What do you mean by it?
It is. What we mean is that where historically, in this case music, but often this is applicable to any vertical, the ability to create or to do something required a significant financial investment, a significant educational and time investment, perhaps multiple individuals, and so on and so forth, a lot of resources, defined however one might. As technology advances, it diminishes the need for massive resource investment to allow an individual to accomplish a goal. And in music, Amper fits in very well to that narrative, insofar as Amper allows any individual to express themselves creatively through music without requiring them to have studied music for 20 years or spent $10,000 on musical equipment and so on and so forth. Now, if you are a musician and you understand the musical language to a degree where you already make music independently of Amper, what's great about it is it helps you in ways that you otherwise would need to do kind of grunt work or assistant work, right? It turns into a collaborative tool. So it's no longer your end-to-end solution. It's part of your creative process. And when we think about Amper as a collaborator with human beings, I think that's grounded in the fact that we started this company as a team of film composers. And
Film composers.
Exactly. And media composers in Los Angeles.
Media meaning what?
Any type of music that was commissioned, not necessarily solely for performance, but for the ability to amplify an existing piece of content. So a lot of what we would do is, movies, but then you do video games and TV shows and specific performance-related things that were tied into a piece of content. But in general, we were composers who were hired for commercial purpose, as opposed to individuals who are fortunate to write music because they want to and with their own perspective, independent of outside influences. And from that perspective and that background, we truly understood how important the collaborative process is to making music and to conveying emotional ideas successfully, both in terms of collaboration between director, producer, and composer, where one might be more musical than the other, but also between musician and musician, and composer, and director and director. And throughout that process, one of the main roles of a professional composer is to translate emotion into music and music back into emotion. You're an emotional translator. And that in itself requires, decades of experience and practice, both formally in the trade and in the craft, and also informally as a music student of 20 years from the age of 5 or 6 when you start playing instruments.
They say that an expert requires at least 10,000 hours of experience to become an expert.
Yeah, and there's no reason to disagree with that in music. You see, the more you work at music, the more you study, the more you practice, the higher your level of attainment becomes, and the more you're able to successfully express yourself.
I want to get back to one point. You used the word collaboration between different areas, musician to musician, producer, musician, etc. Talk a little bit more about collaboration and what that means.
Yeah, collaboration between individuals, first and foremost, depends on who the individuals are and what their goals are, what their skill sets are, and what the context is within which the collaboration is going to occur. And so, traditionally, in a film scoring environment, you'll have a director, among others, in the room, who sits down with the composer, and you spot the film and you talk about what are the emotional ideas we want to convey, who are the characters we want to believe in and invest in, what are the goals of a scene or of a film that music can help support. And this conversation can take on musical terminology. It can reference outside musical pieces. It can get very philosophical. It can really branch off into any number of ways to describe a creative goal.
And how does that apply to Amper Music?
Well, we designed the interface of Amper, as you've seen, to mirror that collaborative process, specifically between someone who's less musical and a composer. And what that means is, as long as you know the emotion that you want music to convey, and at a minimum in Amper, that means the style of mood you want to create, the mood you'd like to convey, and the length of a track. If that's all you know, Amper, in a matter of seconds, can create a unique, professional piece of music tailored to any content, to which you get a royalty-free global and perpetual license. And from there, you're able to collaborate with Amper. You're able to give feedback and suggest changes and modifications and say, I like this, I don't like this, I wish this was more of something, less of this. And that really mirrors that conversation that a director might have with a composer.
Now, how's that feedback plug into the software?
Yeah, so one of the key parts of Amper's technology is that it's able to be collaborative, which is often something that in today's day and age is difficult for alternative technologies because of the nature of data science and machine learning. Right? But when we rely on neural networks, as an example, to take data in, crunch it, and spit out a polynomial.
Now, neural networks, they're bottom up, right?
Neural networks are a bit of bottom up, yes.
Because they're basically collecting raw data and then processing into patterns, right?
Right. And the problem with that is they're a black box, right? You know what you put in, you know what you get out, but oftentimes it's very difficult, if not impossible, to understand how it got to the decision that it got to and why it did what it did.
Okay.
And when you don't have context and contextual awareness for why you did what you did, whether it's a computer or a person, it's by definition impossible to collaborate and to go back and understand, well, I did this for this reason, so I'm going to do this for another reason. If you don't have context, you can't collaborate and you can't recognize subjectivity.
So context is an AI parameter or element?
Context is at a high level, it's a philosophical priority in any collaborative process that is required in order to facilitate a successful collaboration between any two individuals.
So can you give an example of context in a collaborative process?
Sure. So in this conversation, as an example, right? I'm looking at you on the screen, you're looking at me, and I'm reading your facial cues. And I'm understanding, well, if I say this and you tilt your head one way, what does that mean? And how do I respond? Right? Exactly. Now that must have been a weird thing I just said. And if my voice lifts, right, you might say, wow, I think Drew's excited about something. Or if I slow down dramatically, you're going to think that I've got a point of emphasis to make. And it's all of this recognition of the context within which we're communicating that informs how our conversation progresses. Because as we speak more and more and more, you start understanding my tendencies, I start understanding your tendencies, what works, what doesn't, and hopefully we have a more productive conversation because of it, because of our awareness.
Now, I want to figure out how that ties in with music. We're going to take a pause here so that for the radio show, we can add an ID for the show, okay?
Sure.
Okay, so how does context fit in with music?
Sure. So let's apply that to music. You know, one of the great things about music is that there's no wrong answer. You know, you and I might listen to the same piece of music. You might hate it, and I might love it, and we're both correct. There's no right or wrong. It's just different. We might listen to the same piece of music and describe it very differently, and that's still correct. And we need to know why. Because if neither one of us is wrong, and let's say we have two extremely opposite opinions about something, unless we know why we think what we think, we're going to be unable to successfully address either of our perspectives. Because all we did is say, well, let's average our two opinions. Amper's going to do a disservice to both of us. Right? And so perhaps when you describe a piece of music as thrilling, what you really think of in your mind is slow lullaby type music. Now, that might not be how I think about thrilling music. I might think of it as fast-paced and, you know, loud percussion and everything. And you're saying, no, thrilling music to me is soft piano with a harp. And the beauty of the creator space is, while I might disagree with you and you might disagree with me, neither one of us is wrong.
And you actually have with Amper Music a thrilling music option that I think there's a thrilling one, or there's an uplifting one, and an inspiring one, and I'm not sure thrilling is actually, I think there is. There's a thrilling one that when I listen to your thrilling, what you produce, it's like something that you'd maybe see as a background to a Vin Diesel movie or something.
Well, you know, and I think part of that is in service of our goal to understand what you as a user believe the descriptions of emotions in the music to be, and to then create music in line with that opinion that successfully addresses your goal. And so when we get back to kind of what it means to collaborate, especially with music and with an AI, because Amper has context in terms of how it creates music and why it makes the musical decisions it makes, because it knows, well, I made this choice here because these things were happening and I wanted to do this to better serve this musical goal. When you're then able to give Amper feedback and say, well, this was great, but why don't we change the tempo? Why don't we make this more dramatic?
Now, when you say feedback, you're literally talking about changing the settings. You're not saying send an email into Amper that, please do this. You're saying, okay, I want to get rid of this violin sound and I want to add a group of strings, or I want to get rid of the electric guitar and I want to add an acoustic guitar. I want to get rid of the djembe and I want to add a tom-tom or something like that, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the beauty of Amper is that it's a cloud-based creative brain, which allows that collaborative process to be immediate with you. You know, there's no human in the loop in terms of emailing us and saying, could you change this? And then we go to our studio and change it and send it back to you. You're interacting with Amper via the interface in real time.
Now, I've worked in a studio and I've worked with live musicians. I had a recording label, Music Music, years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would be able to do that with musicians, and I would actually be able to say, okay, we were trying to make music for background for meditation and hypnosis and biofeedback. So I would be able to say, okay, I want you to take a deep breath and breathe and make it a little slower and a little softer. And what Amper lets you do is basically the same kind of thing where you're selecting the instruments, you're selecting the beat, you're selecting the the key that it's in, which is really pretty amazing.
Right. And I think what you've just described is a great example of that democratization that technology allows. Because when you were in a studio, you had to hire musicians, you had to hire, rent time in a studio. You spent a lot of time and a lot of money doing that. And now, because of technologies like Amper, you're able, or anyone else is able to accomplish the same creative goal with, orders of magnitude less financial and other resource requirements, which by extension means that more and more individuals and orders of magnitude more people around the world are able to then express themselves creatively through music, which has the potential to open up the greatest creative revolution of all time. We are bringing in so many millions or billions of individuals who previously were unable to join the creative class or the musical class because of a lack of resources. When all of a sudden you're able to say to them, you have an idea, let Amper help you express that idea. And we go from a world of hundreds of thousands or millions of musicians or creative musical individuals to billions. That democratization will likely open up worlds unpredictable to us, even in our wildest dreams.
Now, I should have mentioned this when I introduced you, but you've seen reality step into supporting your work. You've gotten a $4 million investment, from what I understand.
Yeah, so our most recent round of financing was about a $4 million investment from well-renowned venture capital firms.
And has there been more before that?
There has. So we've raised a little over $5 million cumulatively.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So where's that money going to go? What are you going to do with it?
Yeah. Amper's idea, the concept of Amper, computers creating music creatively and commercially, is not a new one. It's been around since the advent of computers. And before that, algorithmic music has been around for hundreds and hundreds of years before that.
Well, it makes me think, I've got a keyboard, an electronic keyboard that has all kinds of different synth sounds on it, and they've been around for decades. That was early, but the difference, and they even have mixes of different sounds that I can select on a keyboard that probably cost $150 years ago.
Sure. And again, the idea of Amper, or the core, can computers create music commercially, is not new. But over the decades that have come before Amper, it's never really been commercially successful in its implementation for a handful of reasons. And so a lot of the resources that we dedicate to Amper are allocated to groundbreaking R&D. Amper is the world's leading AI music technology. And that's not because we wrote down an idea on a piece of paper and said it. It's because we've invested incredible amounts of capital and time and thought into the technology. And so a lot of what we invest in is the technology itself. And in addition, as a young company, we're also fortunate to have the opportunity to invest in our people, to invest in our customers, and to invest in the growth of our technology and our business.
So I want to take a step back because, you've talked about context, you talked about collaboration, but you really haven't described how Amper uses AI in the first place. And really, what is AI to Amper? How does Amper use AI? What kind of AI does it use, and how does it work?
Yeah, so at its core, Amper's goal is to translate emotion into music and music into emotion. And to do that, we must have an AI that understands human emotion. Otherwise, one would be unable to pursue the goal. And so we work very diligently to allow Amper to understand what it is and what it means to feel happy, sad, dramatic, tense, thrilling, whatever it might be. What does it actually mean on a human level?
And how do you do that? How do you use AI to get that?
So part of that is, the secret sauce of the company, right? That we are very protective of because of the difficulty in doing that. But the perspective we take towards doing that is that as composers, right, we in an analog world are required to master that. We're required to have anyone describe what they want. And maybe you say, I want something that's blue and cheerful. And I've got to say, all right, what do you mean when you say blue and cheerful? And what does that actually mean? Like, what does blue mean? Does he mean, a lullaby? Does he mean, something soft and gentle? Or does he mean something that sounds like an ocean? And understanding what human motivation and human intention expressed creatively means is a key part of Amper's ability to make music, because if you don't understand, how can you communicate? And so once it understands, then we say, all right, Amper, we need to teach you how to express those emotions creatively through music.
Well, wait, okay, so you've got proprietary technology that you're not going to share, but AI requires source material generally, or bottom-up AI requires source material, right? So a neural net uses a bottom-up approach, and it basically pulls in information. The other kind of AI that I understand exists is it's kind of a more top-down approach where it kind of specifies certain things. And I don't really understand the top-down AI that well, really. Are you using top-down, bottom-up, both?
Yeah, so we use both. And we use both perspectives in a way that we think best replicates the creative process and most effectively not only creates music, but allows individuals to collaborate with music.
Because you're not really trying to just create music. You're trying to build the technology that enables people to put together the pieces and create it.
Exactly. It's not to say that Amper can't create music autonomously. It certainly can. But when we look at the world of media music, we really see two different types of music. We see functional music, which we define as music that's valued for its use case, where the collaboration and creation that goes into making it isn't necessarily the value. Elevator music is a great example, right? Someone cares about what it's doing, but no one in an elevator thinks, I wonder how many people spent a week writing this piece of music. That's not the use case for that music. And then we've got what we call artistic music, which is music that's valued for the collaboration and creation that goes into making it. It's about that human-to-human creation process. You and I sit in a room and we make art together.
I don't really see Amper music as being that kind.
Well, yes and no. Certainly Amper is a fantastic solution in the functional music world as an end-to-end solution, especially for those who are not necessarily musically educated or advanced.
I used it to make some bumpers for starting and ending in the middle of the show, or
Sure.
it's being used for video game backgrounds and movies and things like that.
Yep.
I would imagine also that it could be used to do a rhythm section, or to be a background for a song where an entertainer could play the recording from Amper and then sing or do guitar riffs or things like that, or piano, so they'd have a fuller sound.
Right, and what you're actually describing is getting into the artistic world, where Amper no longer serves as an end-to-end solution of functional music, but becomes a part of a musician's toolkit. to help that musician do what she already does, but more efficiently, more effectively, and more creatively.
Or DJs, I imagine, could use it as
Or
well.
DJs or composers bouncing ideas off of each other. You know, one of the great, I shouldn't say one analogy that I think speaks very effectively to Amper's use in an artistic sense is when we think about writing a text document historically. At one point, you know, in the mid 20th century, we had typewriters, and they required an individual to, you know, to format the page, to spell check themselves, to version, you know, and to deal with the fact that editability and going back wasn't necessarily an easy thing to do. And all of these core parts of communication of writing a text document that didn't necessarily have any benefit to the actual expression and the actual writing process, right? They were necessary. They were building blocks of communicating, but formatting a page on a typewriter doesn't actually help convey the creative idea in your head. And all of a sudden, the word processor comes out, and you have spell check, and versioning is taken care of, and formatting of pages is taken care of. And all of these elements of writing a document that previously had to be done manually are now taken care of by software, by a collaborative partner. And they free a writer to focus their energy on the creative part of actually writing.
But none of that is AI.
None of that is AI, but the analogy.
Where does the AI come into Amper Music? I'm going to. I know you got your proprietary angle here. I want to get a better picture of what does Amper Music do to learn, and how does that happen? Can you talk about that at all?
Yeah. So, you know, we have gone to great lengths to not only teach Amper Music theory, as if it were a student of music. Understanding.
That's a top-down approach, teaching it theory, right?
Sure. It absolutely is. You know, you could study 1,000 scores of music and come to your own conclusions.
But I know that one of the different things that shows up when you're doing Amper is you can have different Dorian or Lydian kinds of scaling and things like that, although it doesn't seem like there's a way to choose the option once you've selected a different version of it. I don't know. Maybe I haven't figured that out.
Yeah, well, you know, the different modes of music are not novel, right? There's part of what every music student in college is going to learn.
Now, I never learned it, but I suddenly am using it. It's wonderful.
Well, that's the beauty of putting technology, you know, at your fingertips. But so when we teach Amper music theory, and we start providing it a baseline of understanding of the musical world, that certainly is top down, because there are we have the benefit of hundreds and hundreds of years of musical canon that help us as a culture define how we experience things.
All right, so we're going to take a little break here, and we'll talk a little bit more about top-down AI and how that's applied to making music happen. Pause. Okay, tell us.
Sure. So again, as we have, you know, music theory that's been developed over centuries, if not millennia, you know, that in itself informs our human culture, and that informs how we perceive and how we write music. You know, there's a reason that faster music sounds more exciting to us, and slower music sounds calmer and more tranquil. And we're able to instill in Amper a knowledge of music history, musicology, music theory, and music composition as core building blocks, if you will, of the creative process, much in the way that a music student would learn throughout years and years of training.
Now, I got a question for you. In Amper Music, you've got these different categories, and I can't remember, one of them is like rock, another is folk. There is 90s music, and then there's one. What's the other one that's like for movie stuff?
Cinematic.
Cinematic, yeah. And then once you select one of them, you have a collection of different bands or orchestras that you can pick from, and then you can modify the music, the instruments, and the percussion and sounds that are in each of those. And I'm wondering, do you take from users and kind of record the combinations they put together and offer them then with as additional elements as Amper is used? Is that a part of the learning process that Amper goes through? Is it learned from the users?
It's incredibly important to, going full circle, to our conversation about context and about, the importance of collaboration, of subjectivity. It's incredibly important to recognize that every individual might think of the same thing differently, or might describe a different thing the same way. And so part of the goal of Amper, very much in line with what you've mentioned, is to recognize when you want to craft music with a certain set of instruments and a certain grouping of a band or an orchestra. Why do you want to do that? And how does that help you achieve your creative goal? And is that something that persists in your creative desire? Is it a one-off? Is that something that as you and I collaborate more and more, I need to recognize that this is just part of your personality and things that, maybe someone says, I hate that instrument, never play that for me again. Well, if we work together, in 2 weeks, I'm going to make note of that. And I'm never going to play that instrument for you ever again. And that's part of building, trust as a collaborator. And in the same way, it's important that Amper recognize your tendencies, your preferences, your musical personality, if you will, much in the way that a person would, so that as that relationship is built, Amper is able to grow into an effective and trusted collaborator, and not an autonomous system that gives you a response and sends you on your merry way.
Practically speaking, if I select Cinematic and then I pick an orchestra and I use it 5 or 10 times, and each time I delete the big bass drum that goes boom, is Amper going to learn that and start giving me that orchestra without that instrument?
Again, that's a core part of the creative process, right? And it's, if technology, if Amper is unable to do that, then the ability to personalize music to you is hampered. And so when we think about how to make personal collaborative relationships between Amper and you, Amper and me, Amper and every other one of the million people on the platform.
Yeah, 1 million people on the platform.
I used a number I rounded to. We don't disclose that number yet there, but we're excited, in terms of the number of users. But as Amper builds those relationships, it's imperative, because there is no right or wrong answer, and there is no standard that we expect people to fit into, that Amper recognize that individuality and be able to perpetuate the learnings and preferences.
That's a non-answer.
Well, I think it's a recognition of the importance of what, of subjectivity and of learning individual tastes.
Is it possible for somebody to create, let's say, a collection of musical sound of different instruments and then save it off so they can use it another time?
Not yet. Not in the current interface.
It's something to put on the to-do list for your programmers.
Yeah, I will let them know.
Yeah. How are you monetizing this?
Yeah, so Amper is a SaaS platform. Individuals.
What platform?
SaaS, software as a service. And what that means is individuals or businesses right now are able to use, or if you're an individual and you're using Amper for personal use, you're able to use it for free, as you've seen. But for businesses who have a commercial purpose for Amper, they pay to access Amper on a monthly or annual basis. And once you have gotten in the door, if you will, once you have access to the technology, you're able to use it as much as you'd like, to create as much music as you want. And every piece of music you create receives a global, royalty-free, and perpetual license to use. So we're really helping evolve beyond the traditional legal and financial licensing hurdles of functional music.
Well, usually when you've got something like that, where there's a free version and a premium version, there are extra features. Is that the case with Amper as well?
Yes and no. I mean, there's certainly additional layers of the technology. We find it very important right now to be able to offer the technology of Amper to as many people as possible, which is why anyone who goes to ampermusic.com can start making music in a matter of seconds without having to pay us anything. As we evolve as a company and as we advance as a business, there will likely be different different types of Amper and different use cases, and who knows where that product roadmap will go.
Like saving configurations would be.
Like you just mentioned, exactly.
Yeah, I can see where that's going. Yeah, okay. So you've got a collection of different sounds, all these different guitars and keyboards and synths and percussion and strings. No voices yet. No sound. Well, there may be a couple, I guess. There are some kind of synth voices. Are they derived from artificial intelligence? Or are they kind of packaged in there?
Great question. So we create our own proprietary sample library. We bring in the world's top musicians to leading studios around the world, and we record them playing their instrument note by note, thousands and thousands and thousands of times, capturing every possible dynamic, volume, expression, articulation that possible at a very, very detailed level, which allows us to recreate a musical and artistic performance in an infinite number of ways, so that we are working with organic and incredibly high quality source material that once Amper writes a piece of music, we're able to then effectively go into a recording studio and record that and come out with a professional piece of music.
So in other words, let's say you're taking somebody playing an acoustic guitar. How many different parameters of that sound, the timing and what have you, does Amper look at in terms of analyzing it using AI?
Yeah, off the top of my head, hundreds of thousands, if not millions. I mean, it's incredibly detailed, which is part of the reason why Amper music sounds so realistic.
And that's because you've got a kind of an open-ended, bottom-up algorithm that just looks at what's there and then tries to pick out the patterns.
Well, it's not only bottom up. Again, it's a combination of bottom up and top down, right? It's
down guides what it looks for, and then the bottom up finds the patterns. Is that
in a sense? Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Where do you see this all going? Where's Amper going to be in 10, 20 years?
Yeah, well, I think sooner than that. We expect Amper to be involved in the creation of every piece of music around the world, whether as an end-to-end solution for non-musical creators or as a creative tool for musicians, artists, and composers.
Okay. Now, my artist friend thinks that this is terrible for musicians and it'll take away jobs. How do you reply to that?
Yeah. Two ways. There oftentimes is in human society, we all recognize that change is inevitable. It's part of human evolution. And one of the consequences of change, especially when it happens rapidly, is that it creates a future that individuals are uncertain of. It creates an opaque future that an individual might not have an understanding for how I fit into that future, how it affects me, and what my life will be. And again, this is much broader than music to start.
Actually, the concept of democratization is a concept that usually has that kind of a disruptive character or nature to it, whether
Right.
you're talking about email or word processing or 1,000 other different things.
Right. But in general, when technology changes rapidly, it clouds our ability to understand how we fit into the future and what it means for us. And when we're unable to predict with some level of certainty what that future looks like and how it affects us, it often evokes a natural and carnal biological response of fear, because we fear what we don't know. We fear what is unexpected and what's unknown. And a lot of the, I'd say the resistance and the consternation to technologies like Amper comes from a perspective of fear of the unknown. How does this affect me? What does this mean for my future? Why, is the world going to end? And am I going to be left on the outside of the club? And what we say to that is, one, change is inevitable. In 100 years, AI music will be old hat, right? In the year 2117, it will, it'll be as rudimentary as, the light bulb is today, just by the pace of innovation. At the same time, though, just because things are changing doesn't mean they're changing for the, negatively. But our perspective and our goal of Amper as a collaborative tool means that for musicians and for artists and for your friend, rather than having a displacing technology that all of a sudden puts everybody out of work, we see Amper as something that, when put into the hands of these artists, musicians, and your friend, gives them superpowers, gives them the ability to express themselves creatively, more productively. I
have a question for you. Do you have a way, let's say I like what Amper does, but I don't really feel I have the competence to use it effectively. Do you have a group of people who are experts at it who I can hire?
Not yet, not commercial. It's a great idea. It's a great idea.
And is it going to be possible down the road that musicians can create samples that can be purchased and integrated into Amper, so that somebody who loves the guitar work of somebody can then go and say, all right, I'm going to pay an extra $5 or $100 or whatever, and I want to include the work of Jimi Hendrix, or I don't know, anybody, or maybe, with the long tail, it could be somebody in their garage, but that would seem to be an interesting potential for tying into this technology as well.
Right. Well, and I think what you're describing is the core of why we see Amper as a positive force in the creative world, because it's opening up new opportunity and the ability to do new things that previously would be unable to do, much in the way that, Pro Tools did 20 years ago, or that,
Pro Tools is one of the most popular audio editing software programs. Very, very powerful.
Yeah, or that magnetic tape did
of certifications of expertise.
Sure, or that magnetic tape did decades before that. Each one of these technological advancements opens up the door to new with the capital N, and new can be scary, but it oftentimes lets us discover new and invent new ways to be creative that we otherwise wouldn't have the ability to do. And so the idea that you've just suggested, how do we collaborate with Jimi Hendrix? Whether or not that's something that Amber does or will do or can't do or won't do. The ability to now think like that and to say, here's the thing that we could never do before. But now if we combine this new technology and the creative abilities that it can that it can contribute to an individual's creative process with core human creativity, look at the new things we can create and look how we can move the art form forward.
Yeah, I would love to see, you talk about collaboration a lot, and I would, with Google Docs, I can have 5 or 10 people all work on the same document together. We can all get permission, log in on it, work on it together. It would be really cool to have something like that with Amber Music too, where musicians all over the world could do that. I interviewed Eric Whitaker. Are you familiar with his work?
Very much so.
Yeah, Eric has basically, he's a composer. He composes music, makes it available to people, puts a simple keyboard background to it, and then he asks people to sing in different parts of the voice.
The virtual choir.
Virtual choir.
Yeah.
And you can listen to my interview with him and just check him out, Virtual Choir and Eric Whitaker, WHITACRE, on YouTube, and they're amazing. It would be really cool if you kind of democratize that kind of process, because I know he put a lot of money into it and innovating it and creating it.
Sure. And there might be some people who say, Eric, that's terrible. Now, why aren't we going to go into a church rehearsal room and all sing as a choir together? And I would imagine his response would be, you can still do that, but now look at all the additional things we can do creatively. Look at how this opens up the world, no pun intended, to new ways of music making and of creative expression. And it can be jarring because, we invest so much of our lives in learning how to master the world of today, that when the world of tomorrow comes along, and again, we have to figure out how we fit into that world, it can cause, quite a bit of internal consternation. But if we're able to step back and reflect on how we can incorporate inevitable change and inevitable evolution into our lives and how we're able to leverage these technological evolutions with the core gifts that we as musicians hold, the ability to come up with creative ideas and to express those ideas and to affect people at a profound emotional and biological level. If we're able to combine those two things and ask ourselves, what is now possible that previously was impossible, then rather than be scared and be fearful of the future, I argue that we should embrace it and we should recognize the world of tomorrow will be brighter than the world of today. It will be different. But
also different, and
it will be different
without some of the things that today has. And
right.
I do website architecture with a coder, and I argue with my coder who says, well, that won't work on the iPhone 4. And I basically say, you can't design new software, new architecture that is aimed at only, that is limited by old technology. And the same thing is going to happen, I think, with the arts and music as well, which there are going to be some old school people who are not going to like it. It's just like some Chicago Cubs fans hate what's happened to Wrigley Field because they've modernized it and they've added big screens and things like that. And I can empathize with them because there's a nostalgia to that, and there's something really cool about that. On the other hand, they had to pay the bills. And once they went that way, the Cubs won the World Series. So I feel for the folks who had to struggle with that. Win the World Series, change Wrigley Field.
Yeah, totally. And again, it goes to the same, I think, core inevitability of change. Right? That is part of human society, and Darwin, talked about it first, evolution. survival of the fittest. You know, things will change, but change is not bad. It is just different.
Well, what you're doing is very exciting, and we've got to wrap. We've got just a minute or two left. So anything you want to wrap up with, finish saying?
Well, again, we are so delighted to speak with you today, and excited to empower, both musicians and non-musicians alike to express themselves creatively through music, using Amper, both today and hopefully for many, many years in the future.
Great. And this has been an interview with Drew Silverstein, who's the CEO and founder of Amper Music. It's ampermusic.com, AMPERMUSIC.com. I've tried it. I've put in hours just having fun with it, and I've used it and developed something that I found valuable, and I'm going to keep working with it, playing with it, and give it a try. And thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you as well.